Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I'm going to talk about making comics. It's been a while since I've talked about what I'm doing with making comics, and that's because I've been going through an interesting sort of transition period here, which I'm still in the middle of, where I've started to grow my comic book publishing here a little bit beyond what I have the infrastructure for, and so I'm kind of taking a new step, leveling up into like a new phase of making comics. So I wanted to do a video about that because I know there's a lot of other comic creators that are facing a lot of the same challenges as me. So this is going to be a video about how you take this step from being just one person doing a comic to running like a small comic book company yourself. Basically, what's been happening is I want to do more stories. That's the ultimate bottom line. But as you know, 2019 started doing my comic, The Crime Busters, and had a successful Kickstarter launch. Came out a year later with number 2, and then last year I had Crime Busters number 3, and I had the first spin-off comic, which was Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam number 1. Takes place in the same universe, but self-contained. That was definitely a leveling up process just doing that, because with Crime Busters 1, 2, and 3, I did all the art myself. Issue 1, I did all of the art myself. Issue 2, I started hiring a variant cover artist to do one of my many variant covers. With issue 3, I had 2 variant cover artists come in, but I was still doing everything else in the book. With Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam, I hired an artist that's Jay Piscopo. So I wrote the story, Jay did the art. I still did some of the variant covers, but I also brought in another variant cover artist as well. That was a very different experience, and there's a lot of benefits to doing that. Some of the benefits, there's a lot of creative benefits for me as a writer. I want to tell more stories. That's my ultimate goal with all of this, is I just want to make comics, right? From a business standpoint and sort of a career standpoint, partnering with other collaborators expands your reach. You bring in some of their fans. You're not just networking with those creators, you're networking with those creators' fans. So you're bringing in new audiences, both through the working with other creators, but also through having a new product. Now, Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, same universe as Crime Busters, but has a very different feel. Crime Busters is sort of a Scooby-Doo style adventure mystery, sort of like teen detective story. Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam is much more of a straightforward Golden Age style 40s superhero adventure, much more superhero-y. And so it brought in a completely, not a completely different audience, but an overlapping audience. A lot of new people coming into that, a lot of new people coming in who are fans of Jay, and a lot of people coming in fans of the variant artist for that issue, which is Ryan Mendoza from Miskatonic High. So that was all positive. There's also, from the point of view of building up your fan base one Kickstarter at a time, if you're using Kickstarter, the more projects you do, the more people you get that are on Kickstarter, that are buying comics, that see your stuff. You start to build up a trust with people. People start reading your stuff and liking it. So the more projects you do, it kind of scales up. Not everyone's going to return for everything. So, I have a few people that have backed all 4 of my comics, but it's more like someone might back the first one. Maybe something's come up. Maybe they didn't see the second one, but they might come back for the third or fourth. So I have a lot of people that, even though they might vanish for 1 or 2, they come back later. So there's a scaling up, and there's also just having more product. So when I did, for instance, the Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, I did it completely self-contained. I didn't do any promotion except on Kickstarter itself. But in the add-ons, just in the add-ons, I had a thing where you could add on a set of the Crime Busters number 1, 2, and 3. I didn't even talk about the Crime Busters, other than like when I was explaining what the add-ons were. Here it is. And I had 6 people that bought the set of Crime Busters number 1 through 3 through that. And so that's all product that I already had paid for. inventory that's just sitting around. And now every time I do a Kickstarter, I have a new opportunity to sell my backstock, which brings in new readers to Crimebusters or whatever the other titles are. And it also helps with the profit margin because, if I was selling a set of those 3 issues for $18. I had 6 people bought it. That's, if I'm doing my math right, $148. I mean, $108 that I wouldn't have had. And again, since that was all paid for, it was like $108 free dollars for me. Of course, Kickstarter takes a cut, so it was more like $97. But you get the point. So the more products you have, the more products you can sell. And every time you do another Kickstarter, you have more and more backstock from that series. And so doing more titles and working with more creators and more collaborators, there's sort of like you're at like the tip of a pyramid. The higher up you go, the bigger the base gets. And so there's a lot of reasons to do it. Again, for me creatively, it's just to have a lot of different stories in different genres with different characters, different types of stories I want to tell. And so it just makes a lot of sense to start doing this. One of the problems I'm having, though, and why I'm sort of starting to think about expanding in a different way and creating comics in a different way, is that I'm still doing Crimebusters basically myself. And it's just taking it takes a long time to draw, but also as new opportunities come up with some of these other projects, it takes away from Crimebusters. And I have gotten in a position where it's been over a year since the last issue of Crimebusters, and I have been working on it. But whenever I have to do something with Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam or one of the other projects that I'll talk about in a minute, or people just come to me with projects they want me to collaborate on, that takes away time from Crimebusters. And while Crimebusters is still my number one priority, sometimes there's time sensitive opportunities that I have to set it aside to do that, and that sort of thing. And so what's happened is I'm getting further and further behind because I'm only one person and I only have so much time each day to dedicate to making comics. And if I have to do this project for one day, that's a day where I didn't work on Crimebusters. And the upshot to all of this is I've realized that I'm in a position where I'm going to need to bring more people in. That's the bottom line, is more people, more help, more collaborators. And as the projects scale up, that also brings in lots of other complications in terms of working with other people, in terms of paying people, getting more money from the Kickstarters and all that sort of thing. So I wanted to go through like step by step some of the different challenges I'm having here. So what I'm planning on doing right now is I'm hoping that when I finish this, first thing I have planned is when I finish drawing this issue of Crimebusters, previous issues I've done all the coloring myself, but of course it's black and white, so it's all grayscale. So I do all the gray tones myself. I'm going to be hiring a colorist, a flatter, to do actual colors, and we're going to start doing Crimebusters in color. Partially because just from a business standpoint, there are people that do not like to read black and white. There'll be a bigger potential audience if it's in color. But also, if I'm going to be paying someone to do it, then they might as well do it in color. Part of the reason I don't do it in color is because I'm colorblind, and I'm very slow. It just takes me a long time because of that to physically just do the coloring, right? So, they're flatters who are professional colorists. They don't cost that much to put the flats in. And what I mean by flats is they'll put in just the flat colors, no shading, no, a lot of times these days in the modern comic world, colorists will do a lot of the stuff that inkers used to do. They'll make things, look 3D. They'll have all the different shading and stuff like that. And that's the really expensive part of coloring. But the flatting's not that expensive. So the first thing I'm going to do in terms of bringing in people to help me with my workload is as soon as I finish drawing this issue of Crimebusters, I'm going to hire a flatter to do that. It particularly works well because since Crimebusters is drawn in an Archie style, I don't need all these crazy, modern coloring techniques. I only want the flat colors to begin with. So I don't want it to look all modern and shiny. I want it to look flat. So since that's my aesthetic, that will work out perfectly. And I figured that's going to save me about a month of time. A flatter might be able to do the whole issue in a week. It would take me, 5 weeks. So right off the bat, I'm saving myself a month of time, and I'm getting a professional who can do it better than I can. Of course, it does mean that I'm spending money. So when I do the Kickstarter, I'll have to ask for more money to try to recoup that cost. It's not something that I'm passing along to the reader. It's not going to cost more. I'm not raising the price of the book. It's simply a matter of now, instead of needing 75 backers, I'm going to need 125 backers. So I just need more people. I don't need to get more money from the people that are already backing me, right? But that's the first thing. But I've realized recently that going forward, I'm probably going to have to hire someone to just draw Crime Busters. I want Crime Busters. I want to work on the story. And when I'm doing the drawing, it's like I can basically do half a page a day at best. And that's with no interruptions, and that's with everything already written and already laid out. So best case scenario, this issue Crime Busters is 36 issues. Best case, it's going to take me at least 72 days to draw it. Now, in reality, it's taken me over a year to draw it. But the part of storytelling that I really like is coming up with the story, doing the plotting, figuring out, the character stuff, doing the dialogue, coming up with the story. Once I have the story and it's all laid out, filling in the panels, the actual drawing part of each panel and stuff is very tedious, and you lose enthusiasm really quickly. So for lots of reasons, I think I want to find someone to hire to start drawing Crime Busters, so I can do the fun part and focus on creating the story. I can get someone that's a better artist and a faster artist than me, so we can go faster. We can get out 2 or 3 issues a year instead of just one. We can move that story along. It'll also free up a lot of time for me to work on other projects, and I'm going to need a lot of time because, first of all, I have a lot of projects, but the more projects that you're working on, the more administrative work there is to do. So there's a lot, before I get into that too much, there's a lot of different people at different levels that you can hire to help you with the different stages. So again, for me, this issue, the one I'm working on right now, I'm just hiring a flatter, right? I'm doing the lettering myself, but you could hire a letterer. This issue, I'm doing the pencils and the inks myself. You can hire people to do one or both of those. And then you can also hire, if you want, an editor to do all the proofreading and stuff like that. And for now, I'm not doing that either. So I'm just hiring the flatter. But obviously, the more people you bring in, the more money it's going to cost you. However, you're also going to get, potentially, the more artists you bring in, the more artists you'll have promoting the project to their fans and bringing in their fans. And so theoretically, that will help broaden things, and it'll also just help you, with making connections. But what I've learned is there are a lot of complications that come up once you start hiring a bunch of people to do work for you like this. Then there's a lot of technical things that come up. The first one is contracts. So some of the artists I'm running into don't like to do contracts. You'll hire them to do a commission, and they'll be like, bro, just send me the money. And I'll be like, let's do a contract. And they're like, it's fine. It's probably fine, and it's probably fine for them. But I would urge you to do a contract if you're planning on doing publications. The contract lays out a few things. One of the things that you do in the contract is you say how much you're going to pay, when the schedule is, when they're going to deliver the product. They'll have the deadlines and stuff like that. Some of the people that I've done contracts with have just completely ignored that and have not hit the deadlines even remotely close to the contract they signed. And I have been lenient with that because what's really important to me in the contract, the most important part, is there's language in the contract that talks about the publishing rights. The last thing you want to do is hire an artist to do a book. Then when you publish it, have the artist say, oh, I was doing that as like a private commission. It wasn't intended to be for publication. And so I still have the publishing rights to that thing. And those complications can come up. So I would say, it's hard for me because I don't like confrontation. I'm not like a aggressive person or a pushy person or a forward or, I have a hard time when when I say, hey, I want to do a contract and they say no. It's hard for me to insist that we do a contract, right? It just is because of my personality. But it's important if you're going to publish it to make sure you insist on getting the contract, if only to have that legal language. Now, for me, I've been using a contract template that my wife helped me come up with because she works with contracts as part of her job. But she's always like, she's not a lawyer, and she's always worried that there's going to be complications because there's something in the contract that's not right. So one thing I'm going to be doing at some point as I ramp things up is I'm going to be talking to a contract lawyer about this and about other things that come into play with small businesses, trademarks and stuff like that are going to be important as you start like getting bigger, right? So it's important to have a good contract template and to use that with the artists that you're working on with. The other big complication that comes into play that you have to be aware of is your taxes. So one thing that's good about paying these people is that the money you're spending is money that you can claim on your taxes as a loss for your business, right? Because you're going to have to start treating this as an actual business when you file your taxes. If you're getting money in or if you're sending money out, you're going to need to be doing this on your taxes. Now, my taxes are extremely complicated right now, but one of the reasons is that I am a freelancer, right? So I'm self-employed. So luckily for me, since I'm already self-employed, this isn't that complicated because it's just I basically have now multiple different self-employed businesses that I'm running. One of them is just my regular job, my regular work, and another one is the comics. And so things like Kickstarter, they will send you the tax form at the end of the year, and you're liable for the taxes on what you get from Kickstarter. So if you raised $4,200 like I did last year, you're liable. Your tax liability is $4,200. However, Kickstarter only sends you $3,800. So right off the bat, you've just spent $400. Like that's money that you can deduct and then all the expenses and stuff. So last year, for instance, I ended up spending something like $4,900 on various things to do with my comic, and I got back like $4,500. So I lost $400, but I need to keep track of all the stuff that I paid out, right? And one of the things that I haven't started dealing with yet, although technically I was supposed to last year, is if you have a contractor that you are paying more than a certain amount, and I think it's $600 over the course of the year, you're supposed to give them whatever it is, I forget now, a 1099. You're supposed to send them a tax form as an employer because you spent the money on them, right? And you're going to want to do that. You want to keep everything above board, and you want to do that because when you claim on your taxes that you spent the $600 or $1,000 or $2,000 on an artist, you're going to need to be able to prove it. And one of the ways that you can do that is you'll have the tax form that you sent them. So if you spend $2,000 on an artist, but you don't send them a tax form, the IRS is going to have questions about whether you actually spent the money on them, right? Because you've just done something wrong. So, like I said, I was supposed to do this last year and I did not, and that could come back to bite me. But going forward, it's something that I'm going to have to do. And again, it's something where, in addition to talking to a contract lawyer and a copyright lawyer, I really need to have a tax advisor as well to go over how it works to sending these things out and keeping track of things. But anyway, when you're on your own taxes, so for me, when I do my taxes this year, I'm gonna I'm going to be liable for the $4,900 that came in. That counts as income towards me, right? However, I mean, the $4,500 that came in, that counts as income for me. But since I spent $4,900, it's a loss for me. So ultimately, that's going to be a wash, and I'm not really going to owe any taxes on that. Um, I hope, but the more money you're spending and the more money you're getting in, the more complicated your tax is going to be, and the more people that you hire to work with you, the more you're going to have to really keep track of all this stuff. It's not something, when you think of, hey, I'm going to make a comic and self-publish a comic, you don't really think about stuff like contracts and taxes and things like that, but you need to think about it, because once you get bigger, like to the point where I'm getting now, it's starting to become important. When I did the first issue of Crime Busters, and I did everything myself, and I had, I got in, $1,400. Wasn't that big a deal, but now it's becoming a bigger deal. So one thing you want to consider doing if you get to this point is incorporating as an LLC. Now, I have not done this. There's two reasons that I haven't done it. The first and the most important reason is that the whole point of incorporating as LLC is to protect you from legal risk, so that if you owe people a bunch of money and they come after you, it's the company that is liable for it and not yourself personally. However, depending on the situation and depending on the state laws and depending on things that I don't really understand, a one-person LLC does not necessarily get the protections of a regular company LLC, because it's considered to a certain degree to be a dodge, basically. And so the only reason that I would be doing it is for the legal protection. And since it doesn't really seem to afford all the full legal protection that I want, I haven't done it. Again, this is something I'll be consulting with some kind of lawyer about it sometime this year to really get a good understanding. But the other thing is the cost of incorporating an LLC varies wildly by state. And here in Massachusetts, it's very expensive, like everything is in Massachusetts. So it's $500 to incorporate as an LLC, but then there's an additional $500 a year that you have to pay every year to sort of re-up your LLC license, which is not something that a lot of states have. A lot of states it's much cheaper, like $100 or something, and then you're incorporated. Here, it's a pretty big annual expense, and I say pretty big relative to the amount that I'm bringing in. So currently, I've published 4 comics. And I have some money that I've spent on some projects that have not yet been published. So this is the thing that you're also going to deal with is cash flow, right? The more projects you have, the more artists you're bringing in, the more money you're going to have tied up in books. I just started a project unexpectedly. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And I wasn't planning on doing it anytime soon, but an artist came available whose art I really like and seemed like a great fit for this specific thing. So I bit the bullet and I hired this artist to do it, and it's costing me $420, right? I don't have anything else prepared for the issue, for the comic that's going to be in. And until I get the rest of that comic done, that's $420 that I'm out. Once the comic's done and I can go to Kickstarter and I can get the funding and then I'll have it and I can sell it at shows and stuff, I can get the money back, right? But until I finish the comic, that's tied up, and this is the same with all the artists. So right now I have Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam. Jay's currently working on that. I don't want to, talk about the details of how much I'm paying Jay, but he's 2/3 of the way done, and we're paying on a schedule of per pages. Every time he turns in a certain number of pages, it's in a payment. So at this point, with him being 2/3 of the way done, I've paid more than 3/4 of the total money, because there's an upfront as well, right? That money is all tied up. I can't get any of that money back until the book is complete and I publish it and I go out. And I have that for a lot of things. So you're going to have, the more projects you have up in the air and the more people you're working with, the more your cash flow is going to be important, because you're going to have money that's tied up and is basically not doing anything for you. And so that's something that you're gonna need to keep in mind. So for me, it's a consideration when I'm thinking about, do I want to spend the $500 on an LLC, even though it may or may not actually do anything for me? I mean, for me, $500 a year on this, I don't really have right now in terms of this project, because uh, I've lost money every year. And having said that, I went into this year down like $2,300 or something, but with like $3,000 worth of comics that I haven't been able to sell, mainly because there have been no conventions. Some of the issues, particularly issue 2 of Crime Busters, I bought a whole bunch of copies because I had a convention schedule. I had already been booked a bunch of tables in 2020, and then that got canceled, and I haven't had any venues where I've been able to sell these issues. So I have all this stock now. This is another thing that I don't know anything about, but when you're doing your taxes, there's this certain thing where you can claim like a depreciation on this sort of thing, because some of these issues are, um, there's a cost ratio. But anyway, that's outside the scope, mainly because I don't understand how it works. But there's a lot of things that come into play, and if you get big enough, you may even need to start renting storage space and that sort of thing. But I haven't got to that point yet. Luckily, we have enough storage here for the comics. But those are just like some of the things that you have to deal with. Now, those are some of the things you have to deal with. There are other things that you can do, other people you can bring in to help you with things. So the lawyers you can bring in to help with all those legal questions that I just went over. The tax people to help with the tax questions, the artists and stuff like that, the editors to help with the book itself. But then there's the selling the book, right? So for me, that means Kickstarter. And there's definitely ways I can help with Kickstarter. When Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam was finished, so my 4 Kickstarters, my first one I had 53 backers. My second one I had 83 backers. My third one, I think I had 70. So it slid a little, but I didn't do much work on the campaign, and that was also during the pandemic, during 2020. Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam, I had 186 backers. So it was more than double the previous, 100 more. The difference between 83 backers and 186 is a huge, huge amount of work, because I'm doing all the fulfillment myself. That's packing. However, so a lot of those are digital, but it's like packing over 120 packages. Have to get everything individually right. The physically, just the work of packing them, the monotony, and then like getting the packing material and entering all the addresses for the labels and blah blah blah. It's a ton of work. That was probably 6 weeks or more where I was not doing any work on the comics, right? I wasn't doing any work on Crime Busters 4, because all of my comic book time I had to spend working on fulfilling the Kickstarter. This is something you can bring in people to help you with. Now, first of all, there's people that you can bring in to help you run the Kickstarter. There's people who manage campaigns professionally now. I'm still not at the level where I think that is cost effective for me, but I know people that do it, like that are doing campaigns at like 10, 12, 13, $15,000, $20,000. They have campaign managers who do this professionally, is run these Kickstarter campaigns. Doing the campaign, again, it was a month, and every night I was sending out updates. I was like contacting other creators to do cross promotion. I was putting out videos. I was every night. So that was a whole nother month where I didn't get any work done on Crime Busters. So basically with Uncle Sam, that from that Kickstarter beginning to end, including fulfillment, there was 2.5 months where I wasn't able to do a single thing on Crime Busters or any other project. There are people that can help you with that. There are people not just to help you run the campaigns, but you can hire people to help you with the fulfillment. The printers themselves will sometimes have some kind of fulfillment process where they take like a part of the Kickstarter, or you pay on a per ship unit like basis. So when they print the books, instead of sending you the books and then you send it out, they send it out directly individually to your different backers. And that also saves you on shipping, because you don't have the extra shipping, right? So but you also lose the control over whether you're packing the stuff yourself. Like you lose some control that way. So it's interesting. You have to figure it out, but there's other ways you can do. I know some people that they hire people to come, so they get the books themselves, like I've been doing, but then they'll hire someone, sometimes a family member, just somebody to come in, pack the stuff up, make the boxes, put the comics in the bags, and stick the labels on and carry the stuff around, just a helper. And that's something that I might look into doing this time, is hiring someone to help me do the work of actually fulfilling in my next Kickstarter, because hopefully they'll get bigger and bigger, and I'm at the point where it's too much work. The last time I didn't have any time to even do personalized thank you notes, which I usually do. I got a few of them written, and it's just so, 180 some people is just so much. It was so much, that I just couldn't do it. But there are people that can help you to relieve the burden of all of that stuff. There's also other ways that the printers can help you. So for instance, the printer that I use, which is Greco, or Comics Wellspring, they have a partnership plan that they did on my last issue, where basically I told them in advance that I was going to be printing through them, and I put a banner on my Kickstarter page to show that they're my printer, like an advertisement, and they gave me like a 15% discount. So that was a huge help in terms of on that Kickstarter campaign. I brought in $4,200, and after all the fees and all the shipping and all the printing costs and paying for the art, I made $40. And so if I didn't have that 15% off the shipping, I would have lost like $200. So again, that's making $40, but still having like 2 boxes of comics that I can now theoretically sell in future Kickstarters. So I will eventually make money on this campaign. But that's another way, you want to talk to your printer, see how your printer is your partner with this stuff, so they can help you with these things. So those are some of the various ways that you can look for help. There's other tools that you can use. So just earlier today, I finally set up a Trello board where I have different columns. And if you're not familiar with Trello, it's an online tool to help you organize things, right? It's for companies, but I'm using it basically by myself right now. And what you can do is you have these different, it's like having Post-it notes like on the wall, and you can move them around. So I have a column for Crime Busters, and I have notes for each of the different things that need to be done and where they are in the process. And I also have I have a column for Uncle Sam, and then I'm working on 2 new projects, right? So I really want to do an epic fantasy series, and so I've just started working on that. So what I'm doing for my own entertainment is, like, after I finish doing my day's work on Crime Busters, when I finish the 3 panels, I'm burnt out after that. I can't do any more. But I still want to keep working on comics. So then I'll switch over to this epic fantasy, and I'll maybe do some writing, or there's some variant covers that I've been doing designs for. I haven't really been doing the drawing that much, but that sort of thing. So I've been working on that, and I've hired a couple people, artists, to do concept work. And then I really want to do a romance comic, and I've been thinking about this for a couple years, because you know how much I love the romance comics, and I have a story in mind, and that was the one where this artist that seemed perfect for it just suddenly became available unexpectedly. So I went ahead and did it. So now I'm committed to doing this romance comic, because I have this money that's tied up in that project, and I need to work on that. So I have a column for all 4 of those. And then I have another column for other projects that I'm doing. So these are, I mentioned this, alluded to it earlier. There's a public domain superhero anthology that I was invited to do, where the Crime Busters are actually central characters in the frame story that everyone else is working in. So it seemed like, given the importance of my characters and Crime Buster to the overall narrative, it seemed like an opportunity that I had to take. So, and the guys that are running it are really cool. I've met them before at shows, and so I had to set aside Crime Busters for a certain period of time to work on that project. Now that has been delayed for various reasons, but I just talked to them earlier today, and it's sort of getting back on track. So I don't know when that's coming out, but I have a thing for that to show, in the other projects column where I am with that. And then Boston Powers, It's another thing that I was invited to do, the Boston Comics Roundtable All Ages Superhero Anthology. I did a story for issue 3, and they had asked me to do one for issue 5, so I did that. Again, I'm just a writer for that, but I have I have the board now set up so I can see at a glance all the different projects I'm working on and where I am in those. So I have cards that say they're in progress. This is what I'm currently working on. And then I have some that say in progress, but it'll have a tag that says collaborator. And that means that this stage of the comic is currently being worked on, but not by me. It's being worked on by someone else. Now, what you can do with Trello and other things like this is you can actually share the board with other people and give them whatever access you want to give them. And so you can basically, people can be assigned to the different cards. So it would, for instance, Uncle Sam, it would be an icon that has J on it. And so that way, it's just like if you get enough things going on, it's a collaborative workspace, so you can keep track of different tasks that people need to do, right? Right now, I'm just doing it myself. I don't feel like I need to complicate it by bringing anyone else onto the board. But it's handy to just see at a glance, okay, I have cards, like I said, that are saying what's happening now. And then I have a second set of cards that is the up next. And that's whatever the next stage is. So for instance, for Crime Busters, right now, I'm finishing the line work. Up next is getting the colorist. And then I have if I have multiple things currently going on, then I have multiple things up next. So I know that when that's done, I know exactly what the next thing is that I need to do. So I've been trying to come up with tools to help me with that. But in general, I will definitely have 2 Kickstarters this year. Crime Busters is close enough where I'm pretty sure I'm going to be done drawing it by the end of this month. Then it'll be off to a colorist, and I have some other things to do. But that'll be done this year for sure. With Uncle Sam, I'm dependent on Jay finishing the art, but he's 2/3 of the way done, and I think he'll also have it done. So I'm expecting that this summer, going into fall, we're going to get a new issue of Crime Busters and a new issue of Uncle Sam. But once we get to that point, I am hoping to basically just be writing and still drawing variant covers and pin-ups and stuff like that, and drawing covers for the comics. But I'm hoping at that point to be writing and have multiple regular artists, like a stable of artists, and be working on Crime Busters, the next issue, Crime Busters 5. I'll be working on the first 2 issues of the fantasy series, Cthulhu number 3, and this romance comic that I want to do. And I'll sort of take a step back from the drawing, and all the time that I've been spending on drawing, I can spend on organizing these other things and writing, because I can write so much faster than I can draw. I just want to get more comics out. I want to do more comics. So that's the stage I'm at. It's definitely, I leveled up with that Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam number 2, but it was like I just pulled myself over the ledge, and now I'm seeing the next stage of the mountain. And so I'm in a new phase where I'm just switching from being a completely self-contained one-person show to having multiple projects and multiple artists work for me, and becoming more of a publisher than a creator. I don't want to say just a creator, but I'll be more of a publisher, really, because once you're getting to that point. So I hope this helps somebody. I hope if you're in a similar situation this is used to you, and if you don't create comics and you've gotten this far anyway, I hope this has been of some interest to you to sort of show, behind the veil. I'll try to answer. If you have any questions, let me know down below. I'll tell you, like I said earlier, going into this year, I had spent I want to say I'd spent about 11,500 over the last 3 years, and have gotten back about 9,500, right? And now I've spent a bunch more this year on projects where the money's tied up because I don't have any of these projects done. I believe, here's my goal for this year. I think this year I'm going to be able to turn a profit for the first time. Each of the last 2 years, I've lost $400. The first year I lost like $1,600 because there was so many huge startup costs, and a lot of that had to do with conventions. I was looking at my spreadsheet today. I spent $800 on convention stuff that includes the tables, the table fees, but also a lot of stuff just like getting the banners printed and getting prints done for the first time, so I'd have prints to sell and all this stuff. And I only made $220. So I was like $600 in the hole from the conventions, and I thought that getting all that would then pay off in 2020 when I had the big convention schedule and now I had everything set up. And then we didn't have any conventions. So there was $600 lost for that. And then just a lot of startup costs. Paid different amounts to sort of a comic book consulting group that I've been part of, which has been very useful. But I've spent something like $900 on that. Website, domain names, like just buying the programs, buying the drawing tablet. So there's a lot of startup costs that you don't really think about when you get into this. And I'm at the point now where this year, I think for the first time, if I get these 2 Kickstarters launched, I have a chance to actually make a profit this year. So my hope is to make a profit this year, and then next year make enough of a profit where have been able to break even for my entire comics creating life. Next year, when we get to the tail end, the very, very end of next year, will basically be 5 years since I started doing my pre-work on the first issue of Crime Busters at the end of 2018. And if I can get to the point where I've broken even over 5 years and then would have a chance to make money going forward, I will be extremely happy. So those are my goals, but that's just to let you know the kind of scale we're talking about. I've put out 4 comics, and I have 4 more that are sort of in various stages of development, including one that's just barely, 2 that are just getting started now. And, I'm $3,000 in the hole at this point. I think I can break even by the end of next year, but I'm talking about like at that point having spent probably $20,000 to get $20,000 back. For me, that would be totally worth it. I'd be thrilled for that because I want to tell stories. I love creating comics, and spending 5 fun years making great comics that I love and getting into the community is totally worth it. But if I can get to the point where I'm at least break even instead of losing money, great. And then at some point, hopefully this enterprise will get large enough where I can actually start making some money. But again, I'm not too shy about sharing the money details unless it involves a specific person's like pay rate and stuff like that, which I don't want to do. But that's what I'm looking at. And trying to make this transition here again. I'm having to lay out a bunch of money at the beginning of this year to get these new projects off the ground. And that money is going to be tied up until those projects are finished. So it's sort of like everything's always rolling forward. You're always rolling the money into the next project. But hopefully it snowballs. So every rotation around the ball of money gets a little bit bigger, and you end up turning a profit. So let me know if you have any questions down below. I've talked long enough. And I'll definitely keep you updated. You'll be seeing a lot more videos about these comics once I get to the point, hopefully this summer, where they're going to start coming to Kickstarter, and you'll be seeing a lot more videos about making comics at that point. But for now, I got to put my head down and finish these last 6 pages of Crime Busters so I can get this done. So anyway, thanks very much. I'll see you next time.